Story 1. I am a 52-year-old man who works as a butcher at a pork processing plant, and I have never encountered a demanding and entitled customer, often referred to as a Karen, in my hometown. Background. I live in a town of about 20,000 people in southeast Iowa. I've lived here my entire life, except for the 6 years I spent in the military, during which I served in Operation Desert Storm. Though it's been over 25 years, I was discharged in 1996. My military service is relevant because people often underestimate those they know little about. The story. The other day, I was at a neighborhood grocery store, let's call it HV to keep it anonymous, buying a couple of loaves of bread because I had run out. At HV, the employees wear red polo shirts with the company name embroidered on the left side of their chests, paired with either khaki or black pants. They also wear different colored aprons depending on their department: black for the deli mat counter, red for floor staff and cashiers, green for the floral department, and white lab coats for the pharmacy. I couldn't have been in the bread aisle for more than 10 seconds when I suddenly felt someone's eyes on me. I turned around quickly, which startled the woman standing directly behind me, who gave me a frown. We'll call her Karen. Me? You know, you shouldn't stand behind people like that. You never know how they'll react. Karen, I need your help. Now, silly me, I didn't catch the tone of her voice, which should have been my first warning sign. Some people say they have a short fuse. I don't have a fuse, I have a button. Push it, and things can escalate quickly. That said, I've gotten pretty good at keeping it under control. I'm usually very calm, especially since I've had enough violence in my life. I'd give anything to live in peace. Me. If you need help, you should ask one of the employees. Karen, I am. Me? Huh? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She was talking to me. Me. Ma'am, I don't work here. I was wearing a black t-shirt, black cargo pants, black socks, and black sneakers. There was absolutely nothing about my outfit that resembled the store's employee uniform. However, Karen must have been oblivious to this. Karen, don't lie to me, you work here. By now, I could feel my patience starting to wear thin. This unpleasant woman was really testing my limits. Me. What about my clothes says I work here? Karen. You're wearing an employee uniform. You need to help me. Now. Bad move, Karen. I'm about 6'1" and weigh roughly 210 pounds. I'm not a small guy, and my voice is deep enough that when I raise it, people get intimidated. In fact, I've made more than a few people uncomfortable with my booming tone. At this point, any attempt at being polite was gone. I had reached my limit. Me matching her shrill tone with a booming growl. What part of I don't work here do you not understand, you annoying pencil neck? Karen looked shocked, but quickly balled up her fists, ready to fight. I noticed a couple of employees standing behind me, so I returned her threatening glare with a look that said, "Go ahead, try it." Me. Fair warning, if you swing at me like a man, you'd better be prepared to take a punch like a man. Karen relaxed her fist momentarily, but then, out of nowhere, she slapped me across the face, knocking my glasses off and scraping the bridge of my nose. It bled a bit, but the worst part was her laughter. She must have thought I wouldn't retaliate. Well, she messed with the wrong person. She looked at me, and I responded by slapping her right back, hard enough to knock her to the floor. Me. I warned you. Karen decided to pull out what she thought was her trump card. Karen, I'm going to have you arrested. I just smiled and pointed to the security cameras mounted at both ends of the aisle. Me. Have a nice day. I grabbed my 2 loaves of bread and headed to the front to pay, while Karen was escorted to the store's office by security. I found out the next day that the grocery store had suspended her from entering the store for 30 days. Tough luck for her. Story 2. I have always disliked mowing the lawn. However, I don't want to be that neighbor, so I do my best to keep up with it. At the beginning of the summer, I stayed on top of things, but after dealing with a series of medical issues, mowing became more than I could handle. add in a few other excuses on the days I could have mowed, and my lawn was quickly starting to resemble the overgrown yard I feared. To avoid being the neighbor with the unkempt lawn, I decided to hire someone to mow it, thinking I could take over again once it was under control. My first mistake was choosing the wrong company. They advertised a one-time mowing service, but when I called to schedule, they informed me there was actually a 3-cut minimum. That should have been my red flag to back out, but I didn't. The first contractor arrived and immediately canceled the mowing, claiming my lawn was over 23 inches in height, which apparently triggered an excessive height clause. They listed a 500% markup for the service because of this. The photos they took only showed the highest points in the lawn, mainly the front yard, and the tape measure they used didn't even have legible numbers. I was frustrated but couldn't cancel because of the contract. So, I decided to mow it myself and just let them finish out the season. I only managed to mow part of the front yard, leaving the back untouched. Miraculously, 2 weeks later, the next contractor showed up, mowed the entire yard, and somehow didn't mention the uncut backyard. The next scheduled mowing day came and went, and no one showed up. I reported the missed appointment and canceled the service through the app. Despite this, someone still showed up the following day. My frustration grew, and I went back into the app to try to cancel again. It looked like the cancellation went through, and I even took screenshots for proof. Fast forward to today, I received a message saying my mower was on the way. The problem: we've been in a drought for the past month, it's the end of the season, and my lawn hadn't grown even half an inch in 2 weeks. At this point, I was beyond furious. I decided to wait until the contractor arrived so I could speak with him directly. When he did, he turned out to be a nice guy. He was a contractor for the booking company, just as I suspected. He mentioned that this happens to him all the time and said he'd send a message to the company. I felt bad for wasting his time, but there wasn't much I could do. An hour later, I got another message saying I had been rescheduled for the next day. That was the last straw. I called the company and spoke to one agent before being transferred to the escalation team. The representative confirmed that my service was canceled, but insisted that I still owed them one more mowing as per the contract. We went back and forth, but he wouldn't budge. So, I asked him, would you schedule snow removal in the middle of summer? Why should I schedule mowing when it's not needed? Still nothing. Fine, I said. Schedule me for June in 2047. June when, sir? He asked. June 4th, 2047. I'm sure I'll need my lawn mowed by then. We can't schedule that far in advance, he replied. He insisted it had to be scheduled for this or next year, but I kept pushing. I reminded him that I agreed to a 3-cut minimum, and at no point did anyone specify when those cuts had to happen. So, I told him to schedule the next mowing for June 4th, 2047. One moment, sir, while I talk to support, he said. After a few minutes, he came back on the line. Your service is fully canceled. No one will be coming out. Finally, I had won. Story 3. July of 2002. When I was 16, our neighbor, who had quite a difficult personality, decided she wanted to have satellite TV installed. The house she lived in had a very small backyard, an even smaller front yard, and the fence my mother had installed a couple of years ago was only about 5 yards from her side door. The only place the satellite could be installed was on the back of her house, but there was no way the installation vehicles could make it to her backyard. In her infinite wisdom, she decided to have the workers tear down our fence and drive over our property to get to her backyard. This sparked a huge fight between her and my mother. Our neighbor claimed that my mom had built the fence too close to her house. My mother, however, produced the land description to prove the fence was in the correct spot. It turned out both were wrong. We had known that the neighbor's house was built too close to the property line, but it was even closer than we had thought. In fact, the house was only feet from the line, and the fence should have been almost touching the side of her house. Her uncle, who was the deputy mayor of our small town of about 2,000 people, was brought in to try to resolve the issue, but nothing came of it. We thought it was over. In late September or early October of that year, While I was in school, my mom was home taking a shower when our 2 dogs alerted her to someone at the door. She quickly put on a bathrobe and went to see the police chief and about a dozen officers on our lawn, claiming they had received a tip about an illegal substance lab on our property and demanded to search the house. Mom knew that the neighbor had to have been the one to call them, as the police chief was known to be a personal friend of her family. She demanded they present a search warrant. They didn't have one, but refused to leave, insisting they search the property. This situation dragged on from around 9 or 10 m until nearly 3 p.m. At that point, my mom informed them that she needed to pick me up from school and take me to my grandmother's house, as I didn't have my driver's license yet. The officers refused to move their vehicles to let her leave, telling her that they would send a squad car to pick me up instead, which would have been incredibly humiliating for me. Mom called her lawyer, who advised her that if they didn't have a warrant, she should tell them to leave. At this point, the police chief threatened that if he had to go get a warrant, he would tell the judge that he could smell illegal substances on the property, ensuring that he would be granted a warrant for anything he wanted. He even threatened that he would kick down our door, and if our dogs so much as looked at him the wrong way, he would shoot them on the spot. Yes, he actually said that to my mother. Mom called my grandmother to pick me up from school nearly an hour after school let out. She eventually allowed the police to search the house. During the search, they found my mom's gun safe. The safe was made of steel with a circular lock, similar to those used on vending machines, and the key was sitting on top of it. Before anyone criticizes, it's important to note that it was just my mom and stepdad living in the house. I was their only child and lived with my grandparents, visiting only on weekends. My mom also kept the door to her room locked with a key. No one under 18 was getting near those guns. Despite the key being right there, the officers pried the safe open with a crowbar. They then took all of the guns outside and divided them up, including my mom's handgun, which she had a legal permit for. This continued for hours, with my mom sitting outside in nothing but a bathrobe, until she finally relented and allowed the officers to search my stepdad's shop. He had been using it to restore a motorcycle that had been in a wreck about 15 years prior. As soon as they stepped inside, they screamed, "Meth lab," simply because they saw some cleaning agents and bottles grouped together. By 1 a.m., yes, this had been going on for more than 12 hours, they claimed to have found a cannabis plant behind our 6-foot-tall privacy fence that surrounded our hot tub area. When I found out about this, I was devastated. At 16, I was worried that everyone at school would know about it. The next day, which was a Saturday, I was on the internet when a friend messaged me to ask why my mother was in jail. Confused, I told them my mom wasn't in jail. "Friend, my mom says it's on the news right now. They're saying your mom and stepdad are sitting in jail without bond for running the largest drug operation in town history." When my mom called the news station to ask why they had run such a story without verifying it, they apologized, admitting that the police had contacted them and told them to air the story. The next night, they issued a public apology. On Monday, I refused to go to school. I hadn't been there since Friday, but when I returned on Tuesday, my grandfather dropped me off, and I noticed a drug-sniffing dog at the school. Since it was close to drug-free week, I didn't think much of it. Later, my business teacher told me she had seen the story in the local paper, but she thought it looked staged. She advised me to let her know if anyone gave me trouble about it. When I went to my locker, I saw that it was standing completely open, and I exploded in anger. I knew the school had the right to authorize locker searches, but this felt like nonsense. Why was I being singled out? Principal: "No, your locker wasn't searched. You must have left it open last night." Me: "Friend 1 and friend 2 have lockers right next to mine, and they stay until 4 p.m. for basketball practice. They always shut my locker if I leave it open. I haven't been here since Friday. Are you seriously telling me that everyone left my locker wide open all of Monday?" Ultimately, all the charges against my mom were dismissed. The police chief had written in his official report that the supposed cannabis plant was 8 feet tall. When asked by the judge if he was sure, the chief confidently stated, "Yes, Your Honor, it was 8 feet tall." The judge responded, "If there really had been a marijuana plant that was 8 feet tall behind a 6-foot-tall fence, you wouldn't have needed permission to search the property." The case was thrown out. Fast forward 10 years. My mom patiently waited for the statute of limitations to expire. She wanted to ensure there was no legal avenue for retaliation. Once the time passed, she approached a member of the town council at their first meeting after the statute had expired. In small towns, you don't mess with council members. Everyone knows them, and their word holds a lot of weight. My mom approached the head of the council, who also happened to be the grandfather of one of my coworkers. He liked me, so he was open to hearing my mom's story. He informed my mom that none of the guns confiscated during the raid had ever been logged into the evidence locker. Mom explained that most of the guns belonged to me and were family heirlooms. She had detailed records of the guns, including descriptions, serial numbers, and markings, all documented in her notebook. The councilman promised her she would have the guns back by Monday. It turned out that he confronted the police chief, informing him that because no charges had ever been successfully brought against us and the statute of limitations had expired, all confiscated property had to be returned. The chief went pale, and by Monday, all the guns were back in the evidence locker. However, one was missing a scope. It was soon discovered that the police chief had never intended to enter the guns into evidence and had sold them to his friends over the years. He had thought he had gotten away with it, but now he had to buy them back, often paying more than double what he had originally sold them for. One of the buyers had even removed the scope from the gun they purchased. The police chief was immediately fired and arrested for his actions. We got all our guns back. Story 4. Background for context. The entitled board member owned her apartment and was part of the housing board there as an owner. While I was renting the apartment right next door, I had a cat who was a registered service animal for anxiety, and I had the landlord's permission to keep her there. I worked multiple split shifts in disability care, often working until midnight and leaving around 6 a.m., sometimes being out all day doing different shifts. I was very quiet when I came home, and I lived there alone without seeing anyone. My cousin had recently been found deceased after being missing for 30 days, and I was understandably upset about this. I had resumed using tobacco products again. I would smoke just outside my back door, and it started with EB slamming her back door. I realized that the smell was reaching her door, so I moved further out to avoid annoying her. One day, while I was hanging my laundry, EB confronted me about having a cat. She claimed that as a board member, she would have me evicted if I didn't get rid of the cat. I informed her that the landlord was aware of my cat and that she could do whatever she wanted, but she wouldn't succeed. I also pointed out that she had 2 small, yappy dogs, so her complaints wouldn't get very far. Then the false complaints began. The landlord called me, saying that I was allegedly having very loud, intimate encounters at all hours of the day and night. This was impossible, as I was rarely home due to my work schedule, which often involves 7-day work weeks from about 6 a.m. to midnight with split shifts. I was accused of smoking inside my home and banging on her walls. During the few times I was home, I could hear EB yelling and screaming at me from her house, or she would bang on my walls in the middle of the night, waking me up and causing nightmares. She called the police on me numerous times. I ended up recording her to prove to the landlord that it was her causing the disturbances, not me. I had one of the other elderly owners on my side who defended me to the board, as she had witnessed EB's behavior towards me and knew I wasn't unkind, as I would do her shopping on extremely hot days. Eventually, it all became too much for me because I was trying to grieve for my cousin. I informed the landlord that I wanted to move out and asked if I could break my lease without incurring a fine. She agreed, saying I was a model tenant in the other homes I had rented from her. Now for the revenge part. I had a week off to move out and clean. During this time, I played nothing but metal music or adult films at high volume, banged on her walls at night, and filled her mailbox with baked beans. Story 5. This situation came up far earlier than planned, and while I'm happy to announce my daughter and I are finally free, there is some sad news mixed in. Just to recap, I 34-year-old female now have a daughter 6-year-old female with Jeff 37-year-old male. We never dated. It was a one-night encounter where protection failed. I never regret having my daughter despite Jeff demanding me to end the pregnancy, then refusing to be involved for my daughter's first 4 years of life. 2 years ago, he reappeared demanding parental rights. Our country's courts denied it since he was not on her birth certificate his decision, and he had never paid any kind of child support. It turned out he didn't care for my daughter. All he wanted was to use her as a replacement for a child he lost with his wife. Now, before I go to the update, I did get a lot of questions to answer. Did I know Jeff was married? He wasn't when we had our one-night encounter. Are you interested in Jeff? No, I'm aromantic, meaning I do not develop romantic feelings. I don't think that's a healthy mindset for a long-term partner, so I refuse to date. I was okay with one-night encounters until I had my daughter. Why did you send information to Jeff? Because my mother recommended it, and she was absolutely right. Had I not done so, he could have sued me for parental alienation. By trying to get him involved, I actually came out far better situated to prove I'm not trying to keep him away out of spite, but because I truly think he's a danger. Why don't you talk more about your daughter's emotion status? No offense, but I give just enough information on my 6-year-old. I don't think people on this online platform are bad, but this is the internet. I don't really need to speak in depth details on my child's mental state or her actions. What I want to share about myself, that's fine. I'm a full-grown woman. My child is another matter. I don't even post pictures of her on social media. All you need to know, for the people asking, is she's happy, healthy, and has a father figure in her godfather. She's a normal rambunctious little girl. Why was Jeff arrested? He got into an intoxicated fight. Assault charges. It's completely unrelated to my child, but could have been used for custody matters. It ended up being unnecessary. Now, to the update. While our case has yet to be reviewed, we were scheduled for September 2025. Jeff's lawyer contacted mine to say they were dropping their demand for parental rights. About 6 weeks ago, Jeff formally agreed to drop any claims for rights or responsibility to my daughter. I know a lot of people are going to go all over, but what about child support or inheritance? Keep reading. It should explain why it is not worth it. My lawyer went over the documents to make sure it wasn't a legal trap of sorts, and he confirmed they were exactly that. He wasn't asking for anything in return, just to drop. I didn't question more, just had it signed. And now we need to wait a couple of weeks to get confirmation everything is done. Since both parties agree on this, it should be relatively quick to get it through the courts. If it sounds weird that he suddenly just gave up, I thought the same. To be sincere, I was half tempted to investigate, but I was way too busy making arrangements. As some people suggested, I will be moving. I won't leave the country I live in, but I plan to move closer to my support system, my daughter's godparents. It turns out there's a property less than 5 minutes away from them on sale. There's no home built yet, so I have a lot to do, but that's my intended new home. We also got not 1, not 2, but 3 dogs. The cat probably is planning my demise. So with all of these changes, I have to admit, I didn't have time to investigate. The thing is, the whole situation came to me rather than me needing to look. I met with Jeff's in-laws. It was pure coincidence. I was waiting on some things in a store, and they were there. I had met them in passing at that mess of a Christmas party last year, but this is really the first time we talked. My daughter was thankfully at school since the topic was heavy. They recognized me and asked if I could speak to them. I wasn't sure, but I decided to be polite and offered to buy them a coffee. They were very nice. Not entitled at all. They explained they were sorry for their daughter's behavior. She had not been the same since she lost her child. Those who pointed out that she was using her deceased baby's name for my daughter were right, and they just wanted to clear the air with me. I told them I didn't personally blame them, but I couldn't forgive their daughter, and she was a big worry. That's when things went awry. The mother started crying, and the father explained Jeff's wife had passed away. Self-inflicted. I feel terrible for the things I told them. I apologized, but they were very gracious and told me they knew I had no idea. We talked a little about her, about their grandchild. I found out what Jeff told me about how his child died was a lie. And now I don't feel so kind as to keep it wrapped up. He shook an infant because she was colicky. If you don't know what that is, it's when babies just cry non-stop. I was angry. I'm still angry. No one should ever shake a baby to the point they pass away. That's just abhorrent in my opinion. He had told me she just passed away from sudden infant mortality. It's a common thing here, unfortunately. They talked about Jeff and how he swore up and down I would agree with his idea to have my daughter pass for their lost grandchild. And that would help their daughter. They were not really thinking straight, and I get it. Jeff is a charmer, and mix that with grief, it goes nowhere well. There were other things said, but the main thing was they didn't want any resentment on my part towards their family or their daughter. I told them that I don't hate them or their daughter, and how sorry I was they had to go through all of this. They gave me a picture of my daughter's half-sister. She was a very cute baby, and I plan to one day explain things to my daughter. I think it's important she knows. I also know where Jeff's wife and her baby are buried. I think not yet, but when things aren't as raw as they are right now, I'll take my daughter to visit her sister. I called my lawyer after to give him these new details. He did reprimand me for speaking to the in-laws alone, but he understood the situation. My lawyer is a good friend of mine, and he tends to be very blunt when I make mistakes. He promised me he's making sure that whatever ties could exist between Jeff and my daughter are fully cut legally. More things have come to light too. People were right. Jeff was pretty much lying to everyone, trying to paint himself as this saintly father that couldn't possibly be part of his one surviving daughter's life. A lot of people immediately judge single mothers here as homewreckers or ladies of the night, so I had a few bad encounters with people throwing insults and threats my way. Another thing that came up, which was relatively recent. This was about 2 weeks before he gave up. Jeff began telling people he offered to marry me, but I refused him, that I was always after his money. Thankfully, that one lie didn't go far with most people that know both of us, since I've made it very clear throughout my life that I'm never getting married, and I don't need his money. I got into a high-income job to care for my mom, and now my daughter. I don't really care for excessive luxury. His wife passed away not long before he sent the agreement. He didn't want anything to do with my daughter. It does explain why Jeff gave up. I still think he's the most horrible human being that exists. An entitled, violent individual. He felt entitled to my daughter. He failed his wife and harmed an innocent baby. And I know he knows I'm posting this on this online platform. So if you read this, Jeff, I hope if karma is real, it gives you everything you deserve. I want to say more, but I don't want to break this platform's rules. But yeah, here's the good news mixed with terrible news. I might update this post if anything else happens, but I want to believe this is over. I just want to close this chapter and look into a new start. Small disclaimer, I don't know how he got away with harming his child. I have no access to police records or investigation. I'm not part of law enforcement or involved with any judicial entity. For people asking me for more information on it, I'm really sorry, but I can't give you a full legal case. I personally don't know how some people on this online platform get access to police records that easily because I certainly don't have access to them. All the info I have is what I'm told by others' gossip or what my lawyer can find. Update September 15, 2024. Well, it's been 3 months, and good news all around. To begin with, we're finally free of Jeff. Life is pretty much back to normal. My daughter only asked about Jeff once when we went to the park we would meet him at, and it was to make sure Mr. was not there. We also went together to her baby sister's grave. I explained to her as best as I could. I don't think she understands yet what the situation with her half-sister is, but we will go through it little by little. Another big change is I'm dating someone. And no, I'm still aromantic. My best friend who's been in the United States until recently came back and asked me out. When I told him I was aromantic, he told me there was no pressure for romantic feelings. He just wanted a partner he could trust. And while this isn't a traditional relationship, it's really nice. I adore him as a friend, even if I don't see him in any romantic way. He's met my daughter, but we're not doing anything official like moving in for a very long time. Through the grapevine, I heard Jeff is apparently engaged again too. I think it was a very good thing we made that no-contact agreement. If he ever tries anything with my daughter, that piece of paper will be enough for court to tell him to go away. Overall, we're happy and safe. I'm grateful for all the support here through the difficult situation that was dealing with Jeff. Story 6. About a year ago, I was in the midst of a divorce. We were trying to be amicable about it. Due to financial reasons, we had decided to remain living in the same household during the divorce process, not recommended at all. I was planning on moving after we had paid off a couple of bills. We had agreed to live separate lives, with separate bedrooms while under the same roof. But we had one rule for each other: do not bring a date over and engage in intimate activities in the house. I thought this was just common courtesy during an uncommon living situation. During the summer, a large storm knocked out the power to most of our area. A massive heat wave, with temperatures over 95 degrees Fahrenheit, followed. We were lucky because we still had electricity during this time. My soon-to-be ex-husband had just started dating someone new. She had no power and was struggling in the heat wave. In an attempt to be kind and show that there were no hard feelings, I told him that if she was suffering, he could bring her over to enjoy the air conditioning. For clarity, I work nights, so I sleep during the day. One afternoon, I woke up to find my ex and his new girlfriend pulling into the driveway, and she had an overnight bag in hand. Okay, I guess she's spending the night too, I thought. No big deal. I had to go to work that night. My ex was clearly horrified that I was home and awake. What did he expect? The new girlfriend was rude when I introduced myself, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt. After all, meeting the ex-wife in her pajamas isn't exactly comfortable. They went upstairs, and I went downstairs to give them some space, trusting in our agreement not to engage in intimate activities in the house. Oh, how naive I was. We didn't speak much for the rest of the awkward evening, and I went off to work. They were gone when I got home in the morning. Some time passed, and she didn't come over again, although they were still seeing each other. I didn't care much either way. I was glad he seemed happier, but that was about it. One evening before I had to go to work, my ex was quite drunk. He confessed that he had slept with his new girlfriend while I was home that night . I saw red. I'm not usually the yelling type, but I let him have it. He apologized, and I went to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started to plan. The next morning, when I got home from work, he was already gone. I went into his bedroom, pulled back the blankets and sheets, bounced on the bed, and rolled around to mess everything up. Then I unrolled a condom, filled it with my under-eye lotion, it looks similar to certain bodily fluids, and tossed it in the bathroom trash, right on top. I hid the condom wrapper in the blankets and haphazardly made the bed again. We didn't see each other that day, and once more, I headed to work that evening. When I came home the next morning, I noticed his car was still in the garage. That wasn't normal, he should have been at work. I entered the house, and he was still in his bedroom. Uh-oh. He called down to me and asked me to come upstairs. Uh-oh again. He looked like he had been crying. He asked if I had slept with someone in his bed. I tried to look innocent and not laugh and told him I had no idea what he was talking about. He explained that he found the bed messed up, a condom wrapper in the blankets, and what appeared to be a used condom in the trash. After a while, I couldn't keep it in anymore and told him the truth. I had staged the entire thing as revenge for breaking the no intimate activities rule. The most ironic part? He didn't believe me. One of the problems that led to our divorce was that he was extremely jealous and controlling, always assuming I was unfaithful. He told me he had his first therapy session scheduled for later that afternoon. Even better, a few weeks later, he told me that his new girlfriend had broken up with him because of his personal issues and emotional baggage.